I'm fascinated to see Trevor Lawrence, who has been, in my eyes, really impressive from an NFL perspective, but has been average for fantasy, should we call it that? Do you think that going up against this awesome San Francisco defense, it could be finally the week we see Trevor Lawrence break out?
Yeah, and it's a really good place to start. You talking about how Trevor Lawrence hasn't been fantastic for fantasy purposes so far, because you look at things and you zoom out slightly, and he's had 20-point games so far this season. He is the QB 20 in points per game, which that's just not going to do it for a guy who we drafted in the top 10 rounds of redraft, who we expected was going to take this leap forward. And I'm not, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not saying that I don't think Trevor Lawrence can be successful this year or anything, but we would like to see it sooner rather than later. The Niners defense isn't as tough as they used to be this year, that teams have been able to get at them through the air. San Francisco allow the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers, the second most to outside wide receivers. So you'd like to see Calvin Ridley stay hot. They seem to make a concerted effort to get him going in the last game. I think this is a game where Travis Etienne, you're probably looking to be able to play him in DFS. In redraft, of course, you're playing him. He's been a top 5 running back in his last 4 games. And yeah, it just really, it comes down to whether we see a reemergence of Zay Jones at some point. The team this week talked about how IR wasn't being ruled out for him, but he's practically not played for the entire season at this point. And if he does come back, what does it look like? Evan Ingram is a player who's done very well. He's tight end 7, but I'm not sure I'd feel massively confident about starting him against the Niners, like that middle of the field area where the linebackers and safeties come into play. That feels like more of a strength for on the perimeter. So if I've got an option, I'd possibly take it there. In terms of the Niners, though, I think what we're looking to see is how much does Brock Purdy settle down. We saw before the bye, the 3 weeks running, he had 9 turnover-worthy plays, which was second most behind only Gardner Minshew across that streak. So can he take care of the ball better? Can he kind of rediscover the more on-routine form that Kyle Shanahan loves? Brandon Ayuk, he's had 2 top 10 finishes. Everything else has been wide receiver 22 or worse. So it'd be nice to see a bit of consistency from him. But Deebo Samuel's going to be back. He's off the injury report. He's healthy. But it still feels like where the Jags' weaknesses is probably on the outside wide receivers. They allow they allow the most points in the league to wide receivers playing on the boundary. And we know that's a Brandon Ayuk strength, whereas Deebo's going to be working the middle a lot more. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be fantastic. And hopefully this just lives up to the offensive potential. You can see there, down at the bottom of the screen, we've got the DVOA ratings. The Niners ranked number 1 in offensive DVOA. The Jags are 13th. So hopefully the Jags come into it in good form and we get the kind of matchup we're hoping for.
Yeah, the Jags are basically the one defense in the NFL that's saying, please throw on us, isn't it? So I think hopefully it's keyed up for what should be a fantastic game. I'm fascinated by Brock Purdy. There seems to be this kind of talk around at the moment that Brock Purdy's been shown up in the last 3 weeks and he's, shown his flaws. He's not a real starting quarterback. Yes, he struggled against Cleveland. Shock. I think Cleveland are the best defense in the NFL. I think a lot of teams are going to do that. He was poor against Minnesota, but I think everyone's allowed a poor game. I thought last week against Cincinnati, he played well. And I think that if people are buying into this, call it trope, whatever you like, that Brock Purdy is a bad quarterback and he's being shown up, I think it's a fantastic buy low window. If you're in a Superflex league, I've seen him go in 4 trades this week. All 4 of them I thought were undervalued, and I'd have quite happily paid more for all 4 of them. So I think that, yeah, maybe I didn't do a good enough job sniffing around Brock Purdy and try and go and buy some in my leagues, but I'm certainly going to go and do some more tonight, because I think if you can get him for probably a first, maybe a little bit more, I think that's a great deal. He's approaching that territory where I'd play probably a first and 2 seconds for him right now. So if you can buy low, I think definitely go and do that, because this could, as you said, be a really interesting blow-up week this week.
I think it's a really interesting point. And obviously, I bow down to your dynasty expertise more often than try to dole it out myself. But there are so many quarterbacks who are on rockier ground than Brock Purdy right now. The Niners aren't going to be in position to draft a player highly next year. I don't think they're going to be in a position to draft a player highly any year unless they kind of make the aggressive trade up they did for Trey Lance. And after that trade, I don't think they're going to be in a rush to do that. And I think that Brock Purdy is completely fine for what they're after. They're not a team who's going to have lots of cap room every year. At the minute, they've got a reasonable amount. But yeah, perhaps if Kirk Cousins hadn't tore his Achilles, perhaps you could tell yourself a story where they got interested in him again. But no, I think Brock Purdy is one of the safer quarterback buys you can buy at the minute in Dynasty.
Yeah, and we talked about the Trey Lance trade. The reason why Shanahan and Lynch haven't been destroyed for that Trey Lance trade up is because of Brock Purdy. And they need Brock Purdy to work. Otherwise, there's going to be question marks asked about them. The reason why they've been able to spend on Debo, Kittle, Trent Williams, all the players on defense, Bosa, Fred Warner, is because they've got Brock Purdy under center, who's on one of the cheapest contracts in the league. They'd be stupid to not pay him whatever it is, $900,000 per year over the next 2 years and get average quarterback play, because it means they can get studs all across the roster. So, yeah, I think Brock Purdy's going nowhere for at least the next year and a half, 2 years. And for me, that's easily worth the price you have to pay in Dynasty.